What's up everybody, Genix Dividend Investor here. In this video I'll tell you what I'd do if I was broke and how dividends would help save me. And let's be honest for a sec, because we really need to talk about what broke actually looks like right now. I'm not talking about the kind of broke where you have to skip the Starbucks line or downgrade your Netflix subscription, but rather the silence of sitting in your car at 2 a.m. because you don't have an apartment key anymore. I'm talking about doing the math in the grocery aisle, adding up a loaf of bread and peanut butter, and realizing that you have to put the milk back on the shelf. These days we're seeing people working 50, 60 or more hours a week, destroying their bodies in warehouses just to end the month with less money than they started with. We're living through an era where the rules of survival have changed and the cost of existence has skyrocketed, but the advice you hear hasn't changed at all. I mean, you go on social media looking for help and you find some guy in a rented Lambo telling you to manifest abundance, or maybe a financial advisor in a tailored suit telling you to cut out the avocado toast. To me it feels like a slap in the face because it's so disconnected, like they're talking to someone else who already has safety. So if you're watching this and feel like you're drowning, I want you to know that there is real hope in changing things. People don't need another pep talk, they need something actionable that actually works when life is burning down. I don't know what your personal situation is, but I want to share my thoughts on how a different sort of rope can help you pull you out of the pit you feel like you're in. And I don't care if you invest like me, but I do care that you invest. Someone originally influenced me to invest over 30 years ago, and starting and sticking with it has been one of the most rewarding things in my life. Most savvy financial folks will tell you that the best bet for most people is to invest in the SP 500 in a ticker like VU, and then keep doing it for decades and you'll do great. It works because buying the SP 500 lets you own a big mix of strong US companies that have reliably grown over time, so your portfolio grows too without you having to do too much. And for most people that is actually great advice. But if you're trying to figure out how to pay your phone bill, then long-term investing usually isn't ideal. So I'm not advocating for forgetting about the long term, but you first need to figure out your short term. Now, traditional investing relies on capital appreciation, which is just a fancy way of saying, I hope the stock price goes up so way down the road I can sell it. But the problem for a broke person is that you have to sell the stock to get the money. Until you sell it, that money is trapped as just a number in your brokerage account. And savings accounts protect your cash, but they don't really grow it. Dividends can grow your income stream even if you can only invest tiny amounts. Plus, you can't eat capital appreciation and you can't put unleaded gas in your tank with unrealized gains. I mean, when you're in crisis mode, you don't have the luxury of waiting multiple decades because you're fighting a war for survival this month. So you don't need a retirement plan, you need an exit plan from poverty. So my guess is that the main problem isn't that you don't have $1 million, but it's that you don't bring in enough cash. And when you don't bring in enough cash, then you often go in a vicious cycle where money goes out faster than it comes in, forcing you into debt which makes money go out even faster. Most people try to fix this by working harder and pouring water into the bucket, but if the hole is too big or if you get sick and stop pouring, the bucket runs dry instantly. What you actually need isn't a big score or a lottery ticket, but a patch for the bucket and a source of water that pours itself. You need predictable small amounts of money coming in that don't require your physical labor, even if it's just $5 a month, because that $5 might be the only money you made that didn't cost you a piece of your life. And it's an incredibly empowering feeling to realize that you're owning pieces of great companies. Yes, you start small, but you're starting, and those companies will start paying you. For now you can use the dividend cash, but as soon as you get some breathing room, you'll transition from using dividends to help pay your bills to actually using all the dividends to buy more stocks so your income grows even faster. So my solution isn't crypto or day trading stocks, more flipping houses with money you don't have, it's dividends. Dividends are often overlooked because they aren't sexy enough to make the financial headlines, and a lot of people make the mistake of thinking they're just a boring topic for old people rather than the financial lifeline they actually are. They're the purest and truest form of passive income that I've ever found, and I managed to get to a point where my dividends flow in on autopilot and pay my mortgage, my groceries, the whole shebang for me and my family. And the beauty of investing in decent dividend stocks is that they start paying you immediately, either monthly or every 3 months. You can start with a few bucks and slowly your new source of cash flow will trickle in. Now some people get turned off when they hear trickle, but my goal is to get you a new source of income coming in, one which will probably increase on its own over time faster than inflation. And the reason that growth can happen is pretty simple once you understand what you're actually buying. You see, when you buy a stock, it basically just represents a tiny piece of a company that you now own, whether it's McDonald's or Starbucks or Microsoft or maybe a utility company. Most large public companies share some of the profits with their owners, aka whoever buys their stock. These profits come in the form of cash payouts, aka dividends, which will show up in your brokerage account usually every quarter or sometimes every month. The best advice is often to reinvest that cash dividend and buy more shares of stock with it, creating a compounding effect or a snowball effect where your growth tends to happen faster and faster, kind of like interest on interest. And what's really cool is that you get those cash dividend payments from your stocks without having to sell any of your shares, which makes dividends unique. It's kind of like each stock you own is an apartment you own, and your tenants are your companies that are paying you rent, and they pay you based on how much of their stock you own and how much they're paying out per share. Compare that to non-dividend stocks, where you have to buy low and sell high to make money. So dividend investing is different. We buy a stock that pays dividends, and then our plan is just to hold it because we get paid for waiting. A common dividend investing goal is to just keep acquiring more shares, because the more you own, the more dividends they pay you. Now, dividends aren't guaranteed, but some great companies have been paying them for longer than I've been alive, and I'm in my 50s now. I've found dividend investing to be a beautiful strategy for a ton of reasons, including that I don't panic when the stock market crashes. But a lot of people don't get that. Like, still my dad calls me up when the stock market is tanking and asks me if my dividends are going down, even though I've explained to him that the amount you get paid isn't tied to what the stock price does. Like, imagine you own 10% of a bakery. If the bakery makes money, then you get your cut of the profit they decide to pay out. It doesn't matter if the bakery's building happens to be worth less this month or the neighborhood's going through a rough patch. What matters is whether they're selling pastries. If they sell, you get paid. Dividend stocks kind of work the same way, and that's why they can really help you when you're broke. When you're stretched thin, you can't afford to sit around hoping your stocks go up, but you can rely on real businesses selling real stuff and sharing some of the profit with you. You need cash flow now, and dividends can do that for you. And yes, if you're drowning in bills right now, you might be telling yourself, well, no Sherlock. If I had money to invest, I wouldn't be in this spot. And I get that, but hang with me while I go through this. Okay, so I mentioned that utility companies pay dividends, so now I'll use a utility company I own stock in, even though I don't actually use them. Specifically, I'm talking about Southern Company, ticker SO, an American gas and electric utility holding company based in the southern United States. I actually live on the West Coast, but I invested in Southern because I felt it was a well-run utility. And for reference, I own about 28 tickers in my portfolio, most of them blue-chip dividend stocks like Southern Company. You might not care about Southern Company specifically, but I'm showing you this because it's a good example of how a steady dividend stock can behave over time. This is a screenshot of some info on Southern from a tool I'm an affiliate of called Seeking Alpha. At the time I took this screenshot, each share of Southern Company is $88.99. The good news is that most brokerages like Robinhood or Fidelity or whatever let you buy fractional shares of stock with the money you have to invest. So you wouldn't need $89 to buy a share. If you had $44, you'd buy half a share of Southern, and they would still pay you dividends. In this dividend summary section, it says its dividend yield is 3.32%. That basically means if you invested $100 into buying Southern Company stock, you'd expect to get $3.32 over the course of the next 12 months. On the right you see it says dividend growth 24 years, which means Southern has paid and increased their dividend for 24 consecutive years. Right now they pay $2.96 per share. And that dividend yield of 3.32% is just how much dividends they pay out per share, which is $2.96, divided by its current share price, and $2.96 divided by $88.99 equals 3.32%. So as stock price changes, dividend yield changes. The only time their dividend changes is usually once a year when their board of directors reviews how they've done and they vote to increase it or decrease it or suspend paying it or keep it the same. And as I previously said, they voted to raise theirs for the last 2 decades, and since they're still doing well, I bet they will keep paying out more. Utilities are known for being kind of slow-growing companies, usually just keeping up with inflation or a tad more, and this dividend 5-year growth rate shows you on average that they've been increasing their dividend by 2.97% per year. You'll often find that slower-growing companies will have a higher starting dividend yield, but a lower dividend growth rate, and faster-growing companies tend to have a lower dividend yield but a higher dividend growth rate. And since you're broke and you need cash flow, then you'll focus more on higher yielders with lower growth rates. But you have to be careful to not only look at dividend yield, because sometimes the higher yielders are the riskier stocks. We just saw how a lower stock price means a higher dividend yield, and lower stock prices usually means people are worried about the stock and thus the price has dropped. Anyway, your dividends are just one aspect of your return. You also have stock appreciation, i.e. how much it has gone up or down. And if we look at Southern's stock price since the 1980s, we see it's trended up over time. That's how good stock tickers look. Lots of up and downs, but more ups than down. In fact, Southern has gone up about 1,260% since it went public decades ago. But it's also been paying out dividends, so you'd have made more than that. This total return chart, which captures dividends paid and stock appreciation on Seeking Alpha, shows you that in total, Southern has returned 1,434% to shareholders. That's great, but you can also see that it's lagged the SP 500, which has returned about 1,813%. But the SP 500 only pays about a 1.1% dividend yield, and since we're going for cash flow now, I'd not look to it. My point is that your dividends are just one aspect of your return, and you could always sell your stock if you needed the cash, but the goal is to just slowly keep acquiring more shares so your new income source trends up over time. One final thing I want to mention on that dividend summary page is this payout ratio, which is about 69%. The dividend payout ratio is just the share of the company's profits that it pays out to investors as dividends. Like if the company makes $100 in profit and pays out $40 in dividends, its payout ratio is 40%. That matters because if a payout ratio is too high, the company might be handing out more cash than it can comfortably afford, which puts the dividend at risk of getting cut. If it's reasonable, like around 70% or lower, that often means the company has room to keep paying you, grow the business, and maybe even raise the dividend over time. For beginners, it's basically a quick way to judge whether the dividend you're excited about is probably sustainable, and in this case it looks like SO is at a great spot. My guess is that most utility companies will keep growing, as our energy consumption only continually goes up. Anyway, there are a lot of videos on how to analyze a company, but at a high level you want to start out by looking at what the company actually does and whether its profits, sales, and debt show a business that's stable and growing. But now I want to talk about psychology for a minute, because being broke isn't just a math problem, it's a trauma that destroys your confidence and makes you feel like you have no control over your life. The most important moment in this entire journey isn't when you make $1 million, it's actually the day you receive your first dividend. Let's say you scrape enough money to buy a share of a dividend stock, and a few months later you see a notification that you received 42 cents. Yeah, that might sound pathetic that you can't even buy a pack of gum with 42 cents anymore, but stop and think about the fact that you didn't work for it, you didn't answer to a boss for it, and you were sleeping or eating dinner when the money arrived. That 42 cents might be some of the first money you've ever earned that was completely divorced from your labor, and I'll tell you it'll create a spark in your brain that flips a switch. If that spark hits you, start tiny. Download a brokerage app, put in $5 or $10, buy a fractional share of one solid dividend pair, and then just mark the next payout date on your calendar. Micro steps like that build momentum fast. I mean, once you realize that you can make 42 cents doing nothing, that means you can make $4.20. And if you make $4.20, you can make $42. And if you can make $42, you can make $420, etc. That understanding and belief is the fuel that gets you out of the car and into an apartment, acting as an emotional and eventual financial turning point in your life. Like if you're watching this from a parking lot at 2 a.m., then I truly believe that your first dividend may also be a real step towards a better future. Now you have to be careful, because when you're broke, you're more vulnerable and there are investments out there that look like lifelines but are actually anchors. So you want some higher yield stuff, i.e. stocks that pay out a lot of cash relative to their price, but you have to avoid the yield traps, which are companies paying 15% interest that are about to go bankrupt. An example of a prior yield trap is Frontier Communications, ticker FYBR, which offered a dividend yield of almost 29% in late 2017 due to a collapsing stock price. The high yield was a result of the company's financial distress, not its strong performance. Ultimately, the company suspended its dividend in early 2018 and later filed for bankruptcy. This illustrates how a high dividend yield can be a warning sign, especially when it's the result of a falling stock price and unsustainable business fundamentals. They underwent a major financial restructuring to cut their significant debt and then emerged as a stronger, reorganized company focused on fiber optic services. Bottom line, if something promises double-digit yield with no risk, it's probably a trap. I personally tend to invest in businesses that people use regardless of how the economy is doing, including in stuff like sin stocks because people smoke regardless of how the market is doing. You might understandably have an aversion to investing in cancer sticks, so invest in a way that makes sense to you. I also invest in energy pipelines, which are like the toll roads of energy, getting paid to move oil and gas regardless of the price, or things like utilities, which are basically legal monopolies. And again, you might not want to invest in fossil fuels, but you gotta do what makes sense for you. Sometimes controversial stocks have higher yields. I also invest in REITs, aka real estate investment trusts, which kinda make you like a landlord, only you don't have to do anything. Like I invest in Realty Income, a company which owns commercial real estate with tenants like Home Depot, 7-Eleven, and Walgreens. Feel free to watch my other videos if you want to see my entire portfolio in fidelity, but I caution you not to copy my portfolio, as I invest according to my needs and goals and risk tolerances, and I bought years ago, so you buying now might not make sense for your needs. Anyway, you don't need to find the next Amazon or whatever sexy company, as your goal is survival, not finding a diamond in the rough. What you'll find out is that slowly your dividend income should trend up over time if you invest in decent companies. So step 1 is download a brokerage app like Fidelity, Robinhood, or Schwab, or whatever that allows fractional shares so you can buy dollar amounts instead of whole shares. Step 2 is to hook up your bank account so you can transfer money into your new brokerage. And again, don't freak out about not having money, just hang with me. Step 3 is to pick some tickers to invest in, and at first I recommend considering some decent covered call income ETFs, as they have higher yields but also higher risk. A covered call ETF owns a bunch of stocks and makes extra income by selling options that let someone else buy these stocks at a set price. Because it earns money from these option sales, it can pay higher dividends, but the main trade-off is that you give up some of the stock's upside when the market jumps. So dividend stocks mean you own a piece of a company. Covered call ETFs mean you own a basket of companies that generate cash by selling options, at least primarily. I personally limit my portfolio such that only about 15% of it is in quality income ETFs, but if you're drowning, then I think it's worth the risk. I own JEPQ from JP Morgan, GPIQ from Goldman Sachs, Devo from Amplify, and IDVO, the international version of Devo. They currently offer yields ranging from about 5 to 10%. There are income ETFs with yields over 15%, but I personally avoid those. I think a sweet spot for income ETFs is around 7 to 10% yield, and again, in the long run I expect them to underperform the broad market ETFs like VU, but for someone needing cash flow right now, they're worth considering. And again, I'm not a financial professional, I'm just a guy who likes to invest, so take that for what it's worth. In terms of high-yielding individual stocks, I own SIN stocks like MO and BTI, and energy names like EPD, which can sometimes yield up to around 10%. You could also consider something more conservative like a dividend ETF such as SCHD, which holds about 100 dividend-paying companies, but it only yields around 3.7% right now. The problem is that yield is probably too low for someone who needs passive cash flow immediately. Then step 4 is the scrape, where you sell old clothes, work the extra shift, drive Uber to scrape together cash, etc., ensuring every extra dollar goes into the new investing account rather than anything else. And again, I'm just speaking broadly here, you might have other needs. Step 5 is to transfer your spare cash, or some of it, and start investing, but again, let's get real about that. The fact is that dividends won't pay your rent the next month. I mean, if you invest $100 today, you might get $7 to $10 back over the next 12 months from your tickers, and so if you're about to be evicted, then you need emergency assistance, not a stock portfolio. Dividends won't replace the need for an emergency fund, but they can help you start building one. You may owe taxes on your dividends depending on how much other income you make and the type of stock in the account you hold it in, so check into that as well. Bottom line, dividends aren't a get-rich-quick scheme or a magic way to solve all your financial problems, but they are a way to start crawling out of the mess that you're in. They really can start to help save you, emotionally and financially, if you navigate things carefully going forward. Though of course, you're actually just saving yourself. And like anything good, it'll take time. Like you might be 200 pounds overweight right now and wishing for a six-pack. Okay, you can get there, but it'll take time, so don't put off starting just because the goal feels far away. The key is starting, and starting now, and then sticking with it. Starting is what gets you moving down a better path. Dividends are a way to start building a new stream of passive income where your money works for you while you sleep. And once you claw your way out of the financial mess you're in, you can shift from reaction mode into planning mode using classic long-term investments like the SP 500. But right now you're broke, and the danger of being broke, as you know, is that you live entirely in the now, always putting out fires. Dividends help you build a future, even if it happens slowly. But every time you buy a dividend stock, you're staging a quiet rebellion by telling the system that you're not just a consumer or an employee, but that you're an owner. It starts with one share and $1, and it starts with the belief that you deserve to have money coming in you didn't have to bleed for. Don't wait to invest until you have enough money, because you'll never have enough until you start. So start broke, start small, but just start. Build your golden goose and let it help save you. And yes, if you have some nasty debt like credit cards with crazy interest rates, you gotta prioritize dealing with that. But a big part to think about is living below your means, and I mean really getting tight with things. It reminds me of this comment I got this week from a subscriber named Tracking Arette, and I think it's worth talking about. He talked about how living below your means, for some reason, goes past a lot of people's heads, but it's a superpower once it's mastered. Now, you might be someone who is super frugal and is still struggling, but I know lots of people who tell me they're broke, but they also eat out, have Uber Eats, have Netflix subscriptions, etc. If you're truly broke, then you gotta cut as far as you can to start getting things back on track. The fact is that living below your means and investing are teammates, but living below your means is actually more important, though some people only focus on investing. But the fact is you can't just invest money you don't keep. If every dollar is already spoken for, then even the smallest investment strategy has nothing to work with. Saving, which comes from living below your means, is the input that investing multiplies. Plus, it's something you can control the most. I mean, stock markets can go up and down, interest rates can change, and inflation fluctuates, but your spending habits are one of the few financial levers you can control immediately and consistently. And living below your means creates breathing room, an emergency cushion, and lower stress. It helps you create a buffer for job changes, surprises, or opportunities. Investing without that stability can feel like building a house on sand. Living on less than you take in builds the muscle that investing depends on. The discipline that keeps your spending in check is the same discipline that keeps you investing consistently, not panic selling, and actually sticking to a long-term plan. So my main point is that living below your means is the foundation, while investing is the growth engine. If you only live below your means, then yeah, you save money. If you only invest without living below your means, you struggle. If you do both, you win. Imagine someone who earns $30K a year. If they spend $35K, they can't invest and they just dig themselves a hole. If they spend $30K, they survive but never get ahead. If they live at $25K, then they have $5K left over to invest, which can compound into something real. The habit of living below your means creates the fuel that you can use to get your investing rocket ship off the ground. So if you're broke, the first step is to stop the bleeding. Right now your priorities are probably food, utilities, shelter, and transportation. Of course you might have other things like medicine or whatever. Since you're short on cash, I'd contact the utility or landlord and see if you can get some breathing room or help. Maybe look into turning off overdraft protection from your bank, because a declined card stings once, but an overdraft fee hits you for weeks. Or at least research the pros and cons of doing that. Do a 90-day spending autopsy, like review your last few statements and highlight anything recurring or surprising. Obviously look for subscriptions, insurance drafts, app renewals, free trials, dual streaming services, forgotten gym memberships, stuff like that. Cut or pause everything non-essential right away. The next step is to create some breathing room. Ask for hardship options from people you owe money to, maybe utilities or lenders or whatever. Specifically ask about hardship programs and use that exact word. They usually have temporary payment pause options, or reduced minimum payments, or late fee forgiveness, or reduced utility payment plans, or medical bill income-based reductions, or etc. And obviously cut back on things that are easy to scale back on. Consider getting roommates, or house shares, or subletting, or negotiating a lower rate with a longer lease. Consider selling a high-payment car, buying a cheap one, or consider public transit or biking. Call your auto insurance and say you're shopping around. They often lower premiums on the spot. And yes, look at side gigs. Uber, Amazon delivery, house cleaning, moving help, yard work, dog walking, pet sitting, temp agencies, whatever. Consider selling stuff you have you don't really need, whether that's electronics, tools, name brand clothing, whatever. Check and see if you qualify for SNAP food benefits or low-income utility programs or emergency rental assistance. Heck, check your state's unclaimed property site. Many people find old deposits, refunds, or checks they forgot existed. I'd shy away from payday loans as they tend to be predatory in my experience. Look into community resources now, not later. I'm talking about food banks, churches, mutual aid groups, local nonprofits, and community fridge. These exist to keep people from sliding into homelessness or high-interest debt. Heck, even the food you eat can probably be scaled quite back. In survival mode, maybe you can live on rice and beans for a while. Of course, Whole Foods is better, but I'm talking survival mode. The goal here is baby steps, and momentum of doing the right thing is better than perfection. A lot of people are really struggling to get by, and I ask people to be extra kind and helpful wherever possible. Yesterday I saw this post from years ago that embodies what I'm talking about. It's a true story that happened at an airport in Nebraska about a guy holding his daughter in his arms talking to a ticketing agent. The agent asked how old she was, and he replied that she just turned 2. But the agent said only kids under 2 could fly free. Now the guy had purchased the ticket when she was under 2, but unfortunately the fine print was about when the flying occurs, not when the ticket is bought. The man was filled with emotion because he couldn't afford to rebook this flight or get her the ticket with such short notice, but the agent didn't budge. A fellow flyer in line watched as the man stepped aside and made a few calls to try to find someone who could help, and you could tell he was heartbroken. But that's when an angel in disguise stepped in to save the day. A lady in line overheard this guy's dilemma and told the agent she wanted to help. She said she wanted to buy the little girl's ticket, which was for $750. Without hesitation, the woman pulled out her credit card and paid for the ticket. The dad was overwhelmed with joy and hugged the woman, repeatedly asking for her name so he could pay her back. But the woman refused and said, "Don't worry about it," before walking away. Another flyer in line had no idea who the woman was, but he posted about the woman's act of kindness on social media, and within hours they found out who the kind anonymous stranger was. So as you go forward in life, especially these days, I ask you to seek out ways to help others. That woman in the story could offer help because she probably had some spare cash to her name. I want Dividends to give you that margin so you can be the one to step in. Maybe you're in line at the grocery store and you see someone who looks to be struggling in line. Maybe offer to pay for their groceries if you can afford it. Right now, more than ever, I think it's important to give your time or whatever help you can to others because a lot of folks are really struggling. And with that, I ask you to help me out and hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and click that bell notification. Please leave me a comment and tell me about a tough financial time you've had, or maybe you're in it now. I read all the comments and try to respond back to everyone. And speaking of comments, I want to shout out a thanks to PK Investing, who today shared that the #1 channel he watched in 2025 was mine, putting him in the top 0.7% of viewers as he watched 39 of my videos. YouTube shows you a cool recap this year of things you watched when you open their mobile app. This is what it showed for me, saying that my top interests in 2025 were chess strategies coming in at number 1, investment analysis at number 2, AI advancements number 3, sports highlights at number 4, and comedy skits number 5. I also watched a few video gaming channels. So also leave me a comment and tell me what your top YouTube interests or channels were for 2025, especially if I made the list. Moving on, now I want to pitch a Seeking Alpha sale running until December 9th of 2025. You can get a $60 discount, which is 20% off the premium membership, available to everyone including previous paid subscribers. Use my affiliate link in the description below if you're interested. Next, I'd like to show my gratitude to subscribers who left me kind comments, so I'm going to shout out 10 who've done just that. So thank yous go out to Peter Bull, The Strato Dave, Dr. Brett Palmer, John7264, The Spread Positivity Team, BK Divot, Law Goga, Wilco P, and then multiple from Jan Marsh, and multiple from Carpatica Publishing. Thanks folks, I really appreciate it. Now I'd like to pitch my FastGraphs affiliate link along with my coupon code in the description of this video, as using both will allow new users to get 25% off the first payment, even if they sign up for a full year. Also check out my Patreon page, and or consider joining my channel membership, as both have some cool perks you might like. Finally, I'll close this off by recommending that everyone join my free Dividend Discord chat server, which has over 11,000 Dividend investors on it from 87 countries around the world. Thanks for watching, stay positive, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Remember, I'm not a financial advisor, and my videos are for entertainment and inspirational purposes only. Investing of any kind involves risk. I'm only sharing my opinions with no guarantee of gains or losses on investments.